Okay, everyone, we have a very special treat. The very own Georgie Purcell, member of the Victorian Legislative Council since 2022 for the Animal Justice Party. Georgie's a tireless campaigner for animal welfare, animal justice, and he's also super talented and has a degree in law as well as a degree in politics and communication. And she's just a lovely person in general. Welcome, Georgie.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. We also have Mel Harrison, the president of Free the Hounds. Hi, Mel.
Hi, how you going? Hi, Georgie. Thanks for joining us today.
G'day, Mel. Love your work.
Oh, thanks.
And obviously our producer Gemma's in the room as well. Gemma has told me that I am not allowed to fangirl too much over you, Georgie. Sorry.
I'm fangirling over you guys, so the feeling mutual.
But I've admired your positions, your stances, the tireless work you do, as I admire Mel for what she does over here. I was just reading, just not long ago, an article you did for The Guardian earlier this year. You put your money where your mouth is. You don't go quietly by. I think it was on gendered online abuse, and you wore that to Parliament, and I found it quite interesting that you were told to take it off because it was unparliamentary.
Yeah.
Yeah, which the hypocrisy there and the irony is quite strong.
I actually did that knowing that I would be told to take it off, which is kind of the point, right?
Yep.
If I can't wear it in Parliament, why can people say it to me? And I think it's a relevant conversation actually to this podcast because a lot of the criticism I receive for, being young and being a woman and people thinking I don't have a place in our parliament, it comes from these very male dominated industries who aren't used to women taking them on essentially. And I think that's absolutely what's happening in the greyhound space right now. And they're some of the culprits of those comments.
Yep.
And that it's not lost on me that overwhelmingly the greyhound racing fraternity is, a majority
Male.
bloke, and the greyhound rescue community is majority women, and they are so confronted by the extraordinary amount of power that's rising up beneath them at the moment.
Right. Yeah, that's a very good parallel to draw. And I hope that through this podcast we can get more blokes involved. Cards on the table. Grew up as a young kid. Dad would take me to the dogs. And it was just it was a normalized part of my upbringing. And thanks to Gem and Mel and others, I was educated about what it really means. So maybe we can help educate more people like me.
Absolutely. And I do want to say there are some amazing grey dads out there, many of who I follow on Instagram, who are doing a great job advocating for our greyhounds.
I've become one of them. I'm a pathetic grey dad now. I have a princess and I have my boy. George, I just wanted to start by really just asking, what made you get into politics in the first place? What sort of drove you to move into this arena that I know is so hard and can take a lot out of you? What's your driving force?
Yeah, look, so the first thing I'd say is it absolutely was never my plan. And when I say it was never my plan, I actively refused the suggestion of me doing it. I've been a member of the Animal Justice Party for over a decade now. I was one of, the very first members here in Victoria when the party was forming because
Right.
I always had a passion for animals and a passion for politics. And I could see the real profound change that I think we could bring about for animal welfare by having people from our community in political systems rather than trying to change the opinions of people already in there. I knew we had to get in the room,
Right.
but I just didn't think I was the person to do it. And I had this moment in 2016 where I was the president of anti-puppy farming organisation Oscar Law, and we had just secured a commitment of the government for them to outlaw puppy farming and the sale of puppies in pet shops.
Wow.
And the legislation actually passed in 2017, and I was sitting watching the debate and the vote in the upper house where I'm actually a member of parliament now.
Mm.
And I just had this moment where I was like, wow, we can actually use political systems to truly
To
change
affect
animal
change.
lives. Yeah. And so I got more actively involved, and I ended up working for our first ever elected member of parliament who got elected in 2018. And through that process and working in parliament, I sort of looked around and I thought, I love politics and, I think it's actually pretty cool, but there's not many people in here who are like me. And it's no wonder that
Right.
young people and young women are particularly disengaged in our system and have lost faith in it because they don't see themselves, right?
Yep.
Um, and I thought I better stop complaining about how politics doesn't represent me and,
And get
the
in there.
people around me and have a go myself.
Yeah.
So I did.
I wanted to ask you a little more about that later on, actually, that specific issue of how can we get more young people involved. So in terms of sort of moving into politics, you and the party have been a big force, and I'm going to talk about the submission to the bill that was discussed around import-export. But how did you sort of first become aware of sort of the issues within greyhound racing itself?
Yeah, look, I have always, I guess, philosophically been opposed to animal racing. I grew up in a very horsey family where my mum from a young age told me about the issues of horse racing. And I lived in a small country town in Geelong. So, there's a lot of dog trainers in that area. And there's obviously the dogs at Beckley Park just outside of Geelong. And I didn't really know anyone involved in the industry, but I sort of just had this idea taught to me from when I was young that it was wrong. But it wasn't actually until I met a greyhound that I sort of really had that connection of that dog was the opposite of what I expected.
That's
We
what
see them running around
that's what
on the track,
happens.
right? Yeah, yeah.
That's exactly what happened to me. I had this viewpoint of, the scrawny looking little things that run around a track. They're not real, not real dogs, not real pets. And then I met
Yeah.
one, and it's like, not only are you real dogs and real pets, you're kind of like the best breed ever. You're the most gentle
Yeah.
creatures.
The
Yeah.
best dogs ever. And the first greyhound I ever met, actually, I should mention, is quite a well-known greyhound. He's passed away now. My friend Kim adopted Blue, the grey, who became a bit of a social media sensation, and she's one of my good mates. And I met Blue, and he was just like the weirdest, best dog ever. And then my brother went on to adopt 2 greyhounds, and I spent a lot of time with them, and I was just like, these dogs are so misunderstood, but not only that, they're probably the most sensitive, docile animals on the planet. And it makes it feel like even more of an injustice, the way that they're treated in the industry. And I honestly think that's why, that they've been picked for it, because they'll basically endure anything because they are just so sweet and gentle and they're totally exploited for that.
Right. So we're almost using the sweet, vulnerable nature, the fact that we're using that for our own monetary and entertainment gain. It makes it even, I mean, it's bad enough for any animal, but these creatures that are the exact opposite of what we're doing with them.
That's right. But I should say, like, I've always been opposed to greyhound racing, as I said, but I had a real baptism by fire moment where I was working for the Animal Justice Party, as I said, and we campaigned a bit on greyhound racing. But about a week after I got formally declared as elected, I was getting heaps of media inquiries. And coincidentally, the Coalition for the Protection of Greyhounds had just put out their on-track death watch data for the previous year.
Yeah.
And Sky News called me, and I'd been a member of Parliament for like a week at this point, and they said,
for 5 minutes.
will you come on? Will you come on air tonight and have a live debate about greyhound racing and these death statistics? And thankfully, I have the wonderful Amy Weir in my office, who is an absolute greyhound freak, and she just sat me down and we went through every single issue. And I feel like from that moment, we sort of just kept on running with it because we saw the opportunity that came with the weakness of the greyhound racing industry. I really think it's being brought to its knees right now. And, from that moment, we just thought we just have to keep going with it. And we obviously connected with Free the Hounds and a bunch of wonderful rescue groups, and banding together, I think we've become a really, really powerful force.
Oh, that's amazing to hear. And once again, thanks for bringing the power, the voice that you have as a member of Parliament to this issue. So I guess when I first sort of had an awakening, I suppose, the biggest issue, I guess, that came up for me was the injuries these beautiful creatures suffer, the deaths. Georgie, what do you see as the biggest issue with greyhound racing?
Yeah, look, what I will always say is that we obviously focus very heavily on some of the awful and even illegal things that go on in greyhound racing. We've just had another live baiting scandal here in Victoria after the industry insisted that it wasn't happening anymore. And we know that it obviously is. But I think the fundamental point is no matter how much we attempt to clean up the industry, no matter how many welfare improvements we put in place, no matter how good we make their living conditions, which are absolutely woeful under the regulations right now, we cannot stop these dogs from dying on the track. There is no such thing as a safe track. And as long as gambling profits and animals are mixed together, it is a toxic combination. And it's always the dogs who lose as a result of that. So I think the point is that greyhound racing can't be made safe. And often people talk about welfare improvements and, how we can make it better, which of course we will always support as long as the industry exists. But we will always stand by the fact that it shouldn't. And these dogs simply shouldn't be used as commodities. It's not their purpose. It's not why they're here. They're not here to serve us.
Yep.
And it's why we need to shut it down. But I think from a public perspective, whenever we hear about this live baiting or mass graves or woeful living conditions, or even recently, like in South Australia, a trainer kicking and beating and, throwing dogs and puppies, it is the most awful instances of cruelty that allow us to open up the conversation about why it will never be okay. And I think those opportunities have particularly been created at the moment.
Right. You mentioned that sort of level of sort of public awareness. I've often thought, if we ask sort of dog owners who own, golden labs or poodles or whatever it is, would they allow 12 of their dogs or 10 or 12 to line up in a track and know that every year, how many 16, 18, 20 of them will die?
Yeah, in WA, it's a lot smaller, obviously, but too many. Yeah. They wouldn't want it to happen.
Yeah, so it baffles me now that I'm the proud greyhound owner that we want these creatures to line up and race each other, knowing that a bunch of them will die.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
That's right.
No, I think that's something that the industry hasn't quite understood when they have now obviously stopped euthanizing as many because they need to try and keep their social license. But that's what's occurring, is that because they're going into the public and because they're becoming these parts of our family and very much loved pets, then of course you're going to get this backlash where the public are going to go, but hang on, I don't want my dog or the brother of my dog or the litter mate or offspring to be raced and treated that way. So it's like they can't have it both ways. They either want the dogs to be rehomed by the public or they don't. And it's just not compatible, the two contrasts, I don't think.
Yeah. We're always having this conversation in my office. From all the scandal, the industry has obviously been forced to do what they should have always done, which is rehome these dogs as best as possible and give them a good life. But a result of that has meant you cannot walk down the street basically in any town of Victoria without seeing a greyhound.
Yep.
And more people are meeting them every single day, knowing them, loving them. And as a result of that, realizing just how awful it is, the way that they're treated in the industry. It's been an absolute disaster for them.
I kind of love the irony of that, though, Georgie, that
Yeah.
the industry has said, okay, we'll do this thing if we can keep going. And I'm hoping this thing that they did to keep them going is actually their death knell. That now we understand that these gorgeous creatures are beautiful. They're just as beautiful as any other beautiful dog.
Yeah, even more beautiful.
Even more beautiful. I was watching the ABC investigation on the import-export situation. I can't remember the title of it exactly, but basically they're still getting exported to unapproved countries. Just wondering what your thoughts on that are. Are you surprised that this is?
Yeah, look, my expectations of the greyhound racing industry are so low that nothing really surprises me that they do or say anymore. But we obviously knew that this issue was going on, and I need to acknowledge that is largely due to the great work of Free the Hounds, who have done a fantastic job tracking down dogs that are being sent, all over the world, but particularly to China, where greyhound racing is illegal. And, our country is basically responsible for propping up illegal cruelty rings over there. But the story itself was still certainly shocking, and we knew a lot of what was going on in that. So I can't imagine what it was like for members of the public who just had no idea this was happening. And we've raised it with the industry a number of times, and we've written to the federal government, and what is apparent to me is that no one seems to want to take responsibility for this. And as long as that's going on, it's the dogs who will continuously lose out. The federal government says the industry has to stop it, and the industry says the federal government has to stop it. Well, one of them has to stop it, and it's time for them to work together and have some accountability.
Absolutely. I actually appeared at the inquiry, and I unfortunately didn't get the opportunity to speak to Senator Canavan, but I saw him really sort of going for Animals Australia and asking them if they, had leaked the information to the ABC and all of this. And I really wanted to let him know that no, Animals Australia had nothing to do with it. It was me. I Free the Hounds went to the media because personally I tried to approach Greyhounds Australasia. I spoke to GRV, I spoke to GWIC, and I spoke to Greyhound Racing New South Wales, and not one of them would answer my questions or even return my calls. Free the Hounds have also given a briefing to Minister Watt. So we did absolutely everything within our power to get our message out there. And all the time, you were the only person, the only group that reached out and helped us. And so what is someone expected to do? We look at our politicians as our leaders, as people that we can go to when we need things fixed or done or looked at, and they just don't want to know about it. And as you say, just passing the buck. Nobody wants to stand up and actually take accountability for what is going on. And it makes my blood boil. Senator Canavan was wondering why on earth these dogs went through, South Africa or through the USA. The two that I was aware of went via there because COVID was a problem. So there was no flights from Australia going into China at that time. So the industry was saying, it's only been X amount of dogs for the last 5 years. COVID was a factor. We're only seeing ramping up again because the flights are open and everything seems to be fairly good with COVID right now. So that was the only thing that made those numbers drop in that time. I guarantee it.
And as we all know, it's not a handful of dogs overall. And the industry actually said that right to my face the other day. They said it's only a handful of dogs. It's not. But the reality is, even if it is only a handful of dogs, it's still a handful of dogs that are being absolutely betrayed by industry bodies and federal government. And those individual dogs are suffering as a result of it. It doesn't matter if it's 1 or 100. It's still not good enough.
Absolutely. And it's the progeny as well. It's the thousands and thousands of progeny that have to live in those conditions for the rest of their lives, and in South Africa as well. So it's
absolutely.
It was interesting to hear some of their views on it.
Yeah.
And it must be like I'm sensing the frustration, Mel, but I'm very aware of in the midst of that frustration, you keep moving forward, you keep advocating for change. I just want to acknowledge the hard work that you do.
Me too.
In the midst of all of that. They had discussed the bill for the customs legislation amendment, which we're trying to change, well, I guess ultimately ban the import and export. One thing that stood out to me, which I found really strange, Georgie, was that the AVA, they had a subgroup in the AVA, Working and Sporting Dogs group, made a submission basically pro import export. What were your thoughts on that? I mean, given it seems to be in stark contrast to what I imagine the AVA would stand for.
Yeah, look, the AVA and my office have a really interesting relationship because we're on a unity ticket on a number of things, but then there's areas of animal welfare where we're just in opposite directions.
Yeah.
And, fundamentally, when it comes to greyhounds and particularly export, there's vets involved in that process, as we all know. And for them, it could be about animal welfare. And this is obviously, pretty severe animal welfare concern. And I believe that the AVA's position is about sort of the betterment of the breed and maintaining the breed.
Yes,
but,
they made a case for the genetic pool, I think, was their primary argument.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I'd say there is absolutely no shortage of greyhounds in this country. There's a rehoming crisis. I don't think we need to worry about, I don't think we're at the point of having to worry about sustaining the breed. But also, at what cost? If those greyhounds are going to countries where there's absolutely no animal welfare laws and, they're at risk of terrible things happening to them, I think the focus needs to be on the welfare of the individual animals, not the overall status of the breed. And I'd really love to see that position come from them.
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it, no matter what gene pool you're using, you're going to have a winner in every race, aren't you? So
Mhm.
people are still going to punt. There's still going to be a winner. This
Mhm.
drive for the perfect gene, for the perfect dog, for the perfect, specimen, that's all a human desire and the want of these people to make the fastest, the best, the biggest,
Mhm.
It doesn't change the fact that you're still going to have a winner and you're going to be able to take a punt on it. Really, at the end of the
That's
day, does
absolutely
it?
right.
That's a really good point. Actually, I hadn't even thought about that. So it's a spurious argument, really. They're basically saying, well, we want to have really robust dogs to bet on and to die multiple times a year rather than, a little less robust dogs to
Yeah.
bet on and die every year.
Yeah.
Georgie, what's your thoughts on greyhounds being retired as pets to the US? Because that seems to be a bit of an issue.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's definitely something that's increasing. Look, my office's position is, and the Animal Justice Party's position is that we're opposed to the export of greyhounds, no matter what the capacity it is.
Mm.
Obviously, we're facing a rehoming crisis across the whole country here because the industry is breeding, somewhere between 4 and 6 times the amount of dogs than they have the capacity to rehome through industry-run programs such as the Greyhound adoption program. And it seems that they're now resorting to rehoming greyhounds overseas as the solution. But with that comes quite significant risk. There's been a relatively recent instance of a greyhound dying on one of those journeys to be rehomed in the United States. And we think that the rehoming effort needs to be focused here locally.
Yep.
And rather than sending them overseas as pets, perhaps we could look at putting a cap on breeding or reducing the amount of dogs that are being born into this industry. So we're not looking for desperate situations in order to rehome them.
Right. I have just a couple left. How do you think the public can best help end greyhound exports, end greyhound racing?
Yeah. So as we just spoke about, it's politicians that can fix this problem and the industry, but ultimately the industry is ran and funded by the government much of the time.
Yeah.
But it's also the very same people who are ignoring us and, don't want to address the problems. And what I always remind people, and that I remind myself every single day, is that politicians work for you. Politicians aren't your boss, you're their boss.
Oh, that's
And
so
I think
refreshing to hear.
and I think that so often a politician will, ignore a phone call, ignore an email, ignore a request for a meeting, and
not turn up to a podcast, tell you they're too busy.
Correct. And we just accept that is their answer, whereas they are obligated to you as a constituent to give you their time to listen to your concerns. And I always encourage people, if you're reaching out to your member of parliament or local politician, if they say they're not going to meet with you, or if they say they don't want to discuss it, you can say that you don't accept that as an answer. And, I truly believe some of the best campaigns that we've worked on over the years before I was a member of parliament and I was just part of the animal protection community is we just would not take no for an answer when it came to politicians. We would be rocking up at their offices unannounced. We would be, going to parliament. We'd be dropping petitions at their door. And eventually they get to a point where they have to listen to you. So
you've bugged them to the point of, okay, then.
Yeah. And it's disappointing it has to get to that point. But I think that there are far too many tired politicians in there who have been in politics for too long who don't accept the honour and the privilege that having those roles and their obligation to listen to the community. So to answer the question, in order to bring about change, we need to convince our lawmakers and we need to insist that they listen to us.
Well, that's amazing.
So you would suggest asking like our followers if they're passionate enough rather than writing an email or writing a letter, perhaps go and make an appointment with them and give them some literature to take with them so that they're having more of a face-to-face kind of thing, if that's possible.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I can say as a member of parliament myself, an email has impact and we always write back to every single email. A phone has even more impact, and a request for a meeting is, the highest amount of pressure that you can receive. And members of parliament, electorate officers are open to the public to walk into at any time and ask for an appointment. You might not get one then and there. I can say, as an MP myself, often I'm out at the community or at an event or in another meeting, but you can at the very least walk in and ask to book in an appointment. And that's absolutely your right as a constituent. And it is one of the most powerful tools to make them notice you.
Yeah, I think you're really right there. I think even today when I was at the inquiry, I felt fearful. These people, the senators, were sitting in front of me, and I thought, hang on, I'm a member of the public here that just happened to fall across this stuff when I was looking into a breed that I just purchased or rescued. That's actually exactly how I came into it. I got my first greyhound and decided to educate myself on what was happening because I really didn't know. And that's today, and I'm nervous, I'm scared. And I thought, no, I shouldn't be like that because these are elected people, and who else do you go to but these people when you need something done? That's what we're told to do. So
absolutely,
yeah. I think that's a key thing, is not to be afraid or not to think that they're something above us. If that makes sense.
I totally agree.
Makes perfect sense. As Georgie said, they work for us, not the other way around. We've only got one or two more, Georgie. I read an article in The Guardian about how we can get more young people involved in politics. I think you were barely 30 when you... Yeah. How can we sort of activate young people in the way you've been activated to step in and sort of be change rather than try and watch it?
Yeah, I always say you can't be what you can't see. So I'm hoping that I'm helping to change that a little bit. You can see yourself in, the roles and positions you might like to be in life. Research shows it feels like more achievable and you'll chase your goals as a result of that. But I think often young people aren't given enough credit, particularly in politics. There's this real idea that you have to have a certain amount of life experience or work experience in order to earn a place there. And I just fundamentally disagree with that because people go into politics because they have a unique perspective to share. And obviously we all have different ones at different stages of life. And I think with more young people in politics, it will ultimately result in more compassionate decision making. I have a lot of faith in the amount of young people who, for example, are completely aligned with the work that all of us are doing, and they're opposed to the use of animals in gambling industries. And it's, the older blokes that have been there for 30 years now that aren't, that are fundamentally opposed to change. Young people contact me a lot who see what I'm doing now and ask what they can do. And my words of advice are always similar to what I said before, is don't take no for an answer, no matter what political party you're in. Don't tell them that you need to wait until, you're 10, 20, 30 years older or that you're not experienced enough, because the beauty of Parliament is you don't need any formal qualification set to go in there. You just need to believe in something and have the value set and the determination to bring about the change. And that's what I absolutely love about it. And probably why my office has the worst work-life balance in history, because we're also dedicated to our work. But you don't have to be a member of Parliament, I should say, to get involved in politics. There's many political parties, including the Animal Justice Party, where we take on volunteers. We have submission writing groups, we've got policy working groups, we've got election volunteers, we've got committees, and we have lots of awesome people who are working in that space, which ultimately supports me in doing the work that I am doing. So there's heaps of different roles at different levels in politics. All you need to do is find your place and put yourself forward.
Brilliant.
I actually asked for that question because I was at a animal welfare group meeting. It was late last year. When I walked in, I was just gobsmacked at the age of the people that were there. The youngest would have been about 35 maybe, but definitely the average would have been, sort of mid-40s to late 40s. And I thought, here we are discussing a bit of legislation that hasn't been changed in probably, I think it's 20 years at that point. And we're trying to make decisions that the next generation have to live by, possibly that long, because legislation is so slow to change. Why didn't we have a whole heap of young people in there that were making decisions okay, if not on their own, but alongside us, but at least having their input into things, because
Yeah,
they're the people that have to live with it, not us.
that's exactly right. We
So,
always
yeah.
say at work, there's me in the upper house, there's me and one other younger member of parliament in where I am. And we're always saying to people, the decisions we make in here affect young people for the longest. So at the very least, they deserve to have a seat at the table. And I'm certainly not saying there's, older members of parliament don't have a contribution to make or a role to play. I think people often criticise me of that, but it's just that, we deserve to be there too. And people should maybe stop questioning it. And I hope, how hard we're working and all that we're achieving is helping to prove them wrong.
Absolutely. And I mean, if US politics is anything to look at as a guideline for,
Yeah.
there should be an age limit, and you should be taking on mentors that can help you, or at least work alongside, so that the younger
Yeah.
generation do get a say.
Georgie, you're right. You can't be what you can't see, and you look different. You don't look like what we're used to seeing in politicians, and I think that's a huge boost, because you're all about policy, you're all about vision, you're all about what you stand for, but also the fact that you're not a 70-year-old bloke in a suit. I think
Yeah.
that's going to encourage people to open their eyes a little bit more and reassess.
Yeah, that's right. I certainly look different to Parliament, but I don't look different to society. And I think that's what matters. And I'm hoping it's starting to change, and, our Parliament will actually reflect the people that they're representing eventually.
Yep.
Oh, it'll change. The next generation just won't tolerate the things that we've sort of let go, I don't think. I mean, I've got
Yeah.
4 kids at home, and there is no way I get told, you can't say that, you don't do that, that's right, Mum. So I have no doubt that there's going to be big changes. And
Yeah.
it's going to make it great, really exciting.
I want to finish on one last point, Georgie. I've got this extreme metaphor or analogy that greyhound racing is similar to something like slavery, where a certain section of those amongst us were considered lesser than others and were able to be used by those others. And at some point we realized, that that's just abominable, and, it was inevitable. I have this feeling that greyhound racing ending is inevitable. What are your thoughts about, I'm guessing you might hopefully agree it's inevitable, but how long that might take? What do you imagine?
Yeah, I get asked this a lot, and I truly believe that I used to say greyhound racing will end in my lifetime. I'm much more optimistic than that now. I'm only 31. I think greyhound racing will be a thing of the past in this country within a decade or, a matter of decades. I truly hope we can do it sooner than that. But I think the writing is on the wall. I think the social license is rapidly deteriorating. There's a movement around the world to end greyhound racing. I think that moment is coming, and there's been this enormous shift that I felt even in my, less than a year of being a member of parliament, where I think the public is just turning away. The government will no longer be able to justify propping it up with taxpayer money. People will stop gambling on them. Attendance rates are already woeful. There's already no crowds at the races. So I think that is all starting to change. And, there's anecdotal evidence, but my office regularly picks up dogs from trainers that need rehoming. And they will say to us, I want out because I can see it's ending. And it gives us so much hope. And I'm very, very hopeful that we will be able to do it sooner than I said, but I'm certain that it will end soon.
Well, I'm 52 and I'm not dying until it's done. So you're on a clock.
Yeah. We'll get it done for you, Mel.
Thank you.
And apparently there is some very big voices emerging. Free the Hounds is one of them. And there's a new podcast out called Talking Couch Potatoes. Georgie, we'd love to speak to you again at some point if you have any time. Thank you so much for your time with us. Did you have any sort of final thoughts?
Yeah, I always just love to say, obviously I've become a bit of an unofficial spokesperson for the anti-greyhound racing by being a member of parliament, but each and every day I say to people, we wouldn't be able to do the work that we're doing and share the information that we're sharing without the tireless behind the scenes work of all the different organisations, including Free the Hounds, that gather the data and get the information and bring us evidence so that I can take it into Parliament and, put it in front of ministers. So I just want to say that this is an enormous team effort, and it is such an honour to play a small part in that.
It will be a celebration when we finally end this Greyhound
Yeah.
racing. Yeah, can't wait to come back together. Maybe we'll have a little party to celebrate that too. Mel, thank you very much.
Yeah, again, Georgie, thank you so much. And we look forward to doing more work with you in the future. And to your staff, especially Amy, yeah, they're
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you so much for all your efforts
Yeah.
and help.
She's an absolute hero, Amy.
She is. She's gorgeous. I think we're all really sort of coming together and connecting. So it's, it's coming together as it should.
Yeah, sure is.
All right, then.
Please share this with as many people as you can. We're talking couch potatoes, the fastest couch potatoes in the world. You can contact at podcast@freethehounds.com.au. If you've got any questions, queries, thoughts about tonight's episode, the Free the Hounds website is freethehounds.com.au. Thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it.